Hey guys, tonight we wandered deep into the heart of a deserted island where the whispers of crashing waves and rustling leaves mask something far more primal. The firelight flickers, casting long shadows on young faces, some scared, others already hardened. We're about to trace the footsteps of a group of boys who tumble from civilization into savagery, led not by monsters, but by their own nature. You might think this is just another tale of survival. But hold on. This island doesn't just test your wits, it strips them. It's not just about making it to morning. It's about whether your soul survives the night. And you probably won't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time is right now. Always love seeing how global this sleepy little community has become. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all begins with a crash. An unspecified war rages in the backdrop of the world, and a plane evacuating schoolboys from Britain goes down, marooning them on an uninhabited tropical island. No adults survive. Among the wreckage and debris, a conch shell lies buried in sand, and a boy named Ralph soon raises it to his lips. The sound is clear, commanding. It brings others, children, one by one, from the trees and the undergrowth. Piggy, asthmatic and awkward, becomes Ralph's companion, advisor, and unlikely moral compass. Together, they call the assembly. The conch becomes more than a shell. It becomes a symbol of order, of voice, of power. Ralph is voted chief, not for strength, not for charisma, but because he blew the conch. A symbol gave him authority. Yet another boy, Jack, who leads the choir boys turned hunters, bristles at this. He wanted leadership. He gets the hunting task instead. Already, a fault line opens, one between governance and instinct. As they organize, they make decisions that echo adult society. Build shelters, maintain a signal fire, assign duties. But even early on, the cracks begin. The Litlunds talk of a beastie they saw in the dark. They're afraid. The older boys dismiss it, but fear, unprovable, intangible, sinks in like humidity, thick and omnipresent. The fire becomes both salvation and threat. At one point, in their eagerness, they let it rage out of control, setting part of the island ablaze. A boy, perhaps the smallest, is never seen again. No one mentions it. No one wants to acknowledge that they've already lost someone, that their hands might be stained. As days bleed into nights and nights into weeks, the island begins to change them. Hair grows longer, faces grime with ash and soot. Language grows coarser. Ralph tries to maintain order, speaking rules, the importance of rescue. But Jack wants meat. He wants thrill. The conch speaks, but hunger roars louder. Jack's hunters grow bolder, painted in clay and blood. They slaughter a pig for the first time, wild with adrenaline. They chant. They dance. Civilization's mask slips just a little. Ralph is increasingly burdened with responsibility. He looks at the fire, always the fire, the chance of rescue, but his voice grows hoarse, and his words start to carry less weight. Even Piggy's logic and glasses, once tools of clarity, begin to feel out of place among the blood-streaked faces and spears. Meanwhile, the beast begins to take root. They give it shape in their minds, give it power in their dreams. The fear crystallizes in myth. It is somewhere, out there, or perhaps closer. One night, a dead parachutist falls on a mountain, his body tangled grotesquely in the ropes. His lifeless form is caught in the breeze, rising and falling like a specter. When the boys see him, they believe it's the beast. They flee in terror. The descent accelerates. Jack, tired of Ralph's rules and the shell's control, splits off. He forms his own tribe, one ruled by power, fear, and ritual. The divide is no longer ideological. It's physical, visible, irreversible. Ralph clings to the last strands of order. Jack embraces chaos, and others, one by one, follow. And then there's Simon. Quiet, introspective, often alone, Simon seeks truth not in rules or rituals, but in nature. In solitude, he's different, gentle, perceptive. One day, he stumbles upon the head of a slaughtered pig, mounted on a stick by Jack's tribe as an offering to the beast. Flies buzz thick around it. It speaks to Simon, not aloud but within. A voice terrible and calm. The Lord of the Flies. It tells Simon the truth. The beast is not something they can hunt. It is not something they can flee. It is inside them, in all of them. Simon collapses in seizure. When he wakes, he goes to the mountaintop and discovers the parachutist. Not a beast, not a monster, just a man. A dead man. He rushes to tell the others. He runs, breathless, pure with revelation. But it's night, and Jack's tribe is caught in a savage frenzy. They dance, they chant, thunder booms overhead. Simon stumbles into the circle. They don't see him. Or maybe they do. They kill him. In the morning, his body is taken by the tide. Peaceful now. The truth he carried is gone. Ralph and Piggy deny it, minimize it. It was an accident. They weren't really part of it. But their hands, too, are red. Piggy, ever rational, still clings to hope, to rules. But it's futile. The conch, once so powerful, now feels like a toy. When Piggy confronts Jack's tribe, holding the shell, pleading for justice, he is met with violence. A boulder crashes down. Piggy is gone. The conch shatters. There is no order anymore. Ralph is hunted. The last remnant of leadership, of structure. Jack's boys have become predators, faces painted, hearts blackened. They light the forest on fire to smoke him out. Not for food, not for justice, for the kill. Ralph runs through ash, through screams, through memory. And then rescue. A naval officer, clean and bewildered, steps onto the shore. The boys freeze. They weep, not for joy, for what they've become, for what they've lost. The mask has fallen. On the island, freed from the bounds of civilization, the boys initially try to replicate the structure of the world they've lost. Ralph, with his sandy hair and calm demeanor, is elected leader. His selection is not arbitrary. He blows into the conch, a spiraled shell plucked from the lagoon, and its deep sound gathers the scattered boys, much like a church bell might call parishioners. From that moment on, the conch becomes a symbol of order and speech. You speak when you hold the conch. You listen when you don't. It's not a perfect democracy, but it feels right, at least at the beginning. Piggy, who discovered the conch, is never given the same respect. Overweight, asthmatic, bespectacled, he's the voice of logic that no one wants to hear. Piggy suggests counting names, taking stock, behaving like adults. His pleas are dismissed with laughter, ridicule. The boys don't want to be adults, they want to play. And so, the first rift appears, quiet and subtle, the yearning for order against the thrill of freedom. Jack Meridew, choir boy turned hunter, is the first to answer that call of freedom. His boys arrive in black cloaks, a swarm of uniformed shadows under the island's sun. From the start, Jack bristles at Ralph's leadership. He wants power, control, the ability to command without question. The choir transforms quickly into hunters, their black robes traded for war paint, their voices rising in chants rather than hymns. Ralph's primary concern is the signal fire. Smoke equals hope, rescue, a return to civilization. Jack wants meat. The fire, which needs constant tending, represents the future. The hunt, a satiation of the present. And in this subtle split between forward-looking order and present-centered instinct, the core conflict begins to take shape. Despite their differences, early days on the island pass with an almost dreamlike rhythm. They build shelters, swim in the lagoon, gather fruit, and joke under the stars. But time, like the tide, erodes. The work becomes tiresome. Only a few boys, Simon, Piggy, Ralph, stick to the routines. The others drift. The idea of play, of the hunt, of escape from responsibility grows stronger. It's Simon, the quiet boy with luminous eyes, who sees most clearly. One afternoon, he slips away from the others and discovers a hidden clearing, a sanctuary of sorts. There, surrounded by butterflies and sunlight, he exists in stillness. He's not playing. He's not working. He's simply being. Simon doesn't talk much, but he listens to nature, to the wind, to the whispers of something older and deeper than rules and fire. He represents a different truth, not civilization, not savagery, but spirit. Then something unthinkable happens. One day, the fire goes out. A ship passes in the distance. Smoke could have saved them, but Jack and his hunters have let it die. Why? Because they were off in the forest, killing a pig. It's a scene soaked in adrenaline and blood. The boys chant, dance, smear red across their faces. They return triumphant, dragging the carcass behind them, a grotesque trophy of their conquest. Ralph is livid. The ship is gone. Their chance at rescue gone. But Jack doesn't apologize. He doesn't see it as failure. He sees it as victory. For the first time, he's tasted power, not just over the pig, but over the boys who now cheer for him. The split deepens. From this moment, the island ceases to be a neutral ground. It becomes a mirror. One side reflects the echo of civilization, the flickering flame of order and cooperation. The other reflects something more ancient, violence, power, the pull of dominance over unity. The island magnifies what they bring to it. It strips away the uniforms, the rules, the adult expectations. And what is left? Not just boys, but impulses. The descent is gradual, like walking into the ocean step by step. Jack's hunters paint their faces. They speak less with words, more with howls. The rules begin to feel irrelevant. Piggy becomes a punching bag, his intellect dismissed as weakness. The conch? It still shines, but it's fading, both in color and in meaning. Yet not all are lost. Ralph clings to the hope of fire. He tries to keep meetings going, to remind the others that they're not savages. But even he begins to falter. The weight of leadership, of isolation, presses down like the island heat. He begins to forget why he believed in the rules. He begins to forget what rescue even means. Simon remains different. He begins to have strange, fainting spells, episodes of overwhelming sensation, as if reality is too bright, too loud. One day, while the hunters are off in the forest, Simon finds himself again in that quiet clearing. There, the boys have left a grisly offering, the severed head of a pig, mounted on a stick, buzzing with flies. The Lord of the Flies. It speaks to him, not with words exactly, but with an undeniable force. A dark whisper, a recognition. The beast, it tells him, isn't in the forest. It isn't in the shadows. It isn't something you can kill with a spear. The beast is inside. Inside all of them. Inside Simon. And that's when the real nightmare begins to take shape. The conch shell lies in the dust now, shattered like the boy's last illusion of order. From a moment Jack fully breaks away, we watch the moral compass of the island fracture, pointing no longer to civilization, but to impulse, fear, and unexamined desire. Roger sharpens a stick at both ends. Those 7 words echo later, hauntingly, but even before their full weight drops, their mere suggestion hums with dread. Roger is no longer just a follower. He's an embodiment of something darker, beyond chaos, beyond rebellion. He's the island's first true nihilist. And it begins quietly, doesn't it? With Roger throwing stones at Litluns, but carefully missing. The invisible walls of civilization still bind him. But as the days peel away the layers of that restraint, Roger becomes unshackled. By the time he rolls that boulder to crush Piggy, it is not an accident. It's a declaration. Authority no longer means rules. It means power. And power, ears taken with blood. Piggy's death is pivotal, not only because it's the book's most brutal moment so far, but because it represents the obliteration of reason. He's not the most likable boy, but he is the only one consistently invoking thought, justice, fairness. Without him, the conch breaks, both physically and metaphorically. The voice of logic has been silenced, and now the island belongs to instinct. Meanwhile, Ralph runs, and hides, and runs again. You feel the forest closing in around him. The sharp leaves, the darkened sky, the thick silence punctuated by distant chants. Golding draws you into Ralph's descent with unbearable intimacy. Every breath feels like a last gasp, and yet Ralph remains conscious. This is not just about survival, it's about memory. He remembers Simon. He remembers Piggy. He remembers the world that once was. Unlike Jack and his tribe, Ralph hasn't shed his humanity, and that, ironically, makes him the most vulnerable. Jack has completed his transformation. He is chief, not elected, not asked. He is obeyed. He paints his face with ash and blood, becoming something primal. Notice how Golding describes Jack not just as changed, but as unrecognizable. The painted mask doesn't conceal him, it frees him. The civilized boy is dead. In his place, a leader of rituals, sacrifices, and fear. Fear, of course, becomes their only law. The beast is now fully internalized. It no longer lurks in the forest. It sits in the hearts of the boys. That earlier scene, Simon crawling out from the trees, mistaken for the beast, murdered in a frenzy of rain and hysteria, it remains unspoken, unatoned. There is no justice here, no punishment, only silence. That silence becomes a void in the boys' minds, a space filled quickly by myth and madness. Jack uses it masterfully. He wields fear like a priest of an ancient, unforgiving god. His tribe dances in rhythmic frenzy, sacrifices pigs with grotesque joy, and mounts their heads on sticks. One such head, the Lord of the Flies, sits grinning in the forest, blackened, buzzing with flies, speaking to Simon in hallucinated whispers. Or perhaps not hallucinated. The Lord of the Flies speaks the truth, after all, that the beast is not something they can kill, because the beast is them. Let's linger here, because this is not just about lost boys on an island. This is about all of us. Golding's genius lies in showing how quickly, how easily the veil drops. Strip away comfort, strip away rules, and the animal stirs. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It seduces. It promises freedom, but it demands cruelty. Jack is not a monster. He is a boy who listened too closely to those whispers. That's why this story lingers like a nightmare, because you see how close it always is. Even in their most savage moments, the boys mimic what they knew. The chants, the power struggles, the symbols of status. Their tribe is not anarchic. It's a twisted version of society. They have roles, rituals, hierarchies. Even in rebellion, we replicate. It's the paradox of humanity. We crave both freedom and structure. And in the absence of structure, we build one from bones and fear. Meanwhile, Sam and Eric, Samneric, cling to the last ember of conscience. Their eventual capture, their forced betrayal of Ralph's hiding spot, is heartbreaking not because of what they do, but because of how they weep. They are not gone, not entirely, but they are cornered. Conscience has no place in Jack's regime. Golding weaves this descent with the coldness of Greek tragedy. There is no redemption arc, no rescue plan. Only Ralph, alone now, counting his breaths, hoping the dawn does not come. And just as we reach what feels like the story's nadir, utter dehumanization, a hunt not for food, but for sport, we are interrupted. A naval officer appears. His crisp uniform, his bemused expression, his condescending questions, they should be comforting. But they're not. They're a mirror, because the man who rescues them is himself part of a greater war. A war that likely mirrors the chaos these boys enacted in microcosm. You can almost hear Golding whisper, "Do you really think the adults are any better?" The officer chastises them, not for murder, not for collapse, but for not being British enough, as if decorum were the tragedy here. Ralph weeps, not for joy, not even entirely for Piggy, but for the loss of innocence, for the darkness of man's heart. The island doesn't burn at the end by accident. It burns because in hunting Ralph, they torch everything. Civilization, once fragile, is now ash. But maybe, just maybe, some seed of awareness is planted. Because this isn't just a tale of boys lost. It's about waking up. Remember, this is level 5, the veil lifts. And what it reveals isn't just horror. It's truth. The line between civilization and savagery has never been thinner. As we continue this story, Jack's new tribe, having now split from Ralph's group, descends deeper into primal rhythms, losing all pretense of order or decorum. They paint their faces with clay and charcoal, symbolic masks that allow them to shed the final constraints of self-consciousness and societal norms. These masks, eerily reminiscent of ancient war rituals, free them to act without remorse. Their chants swell with primitive rhythm, and their groupthink intensifies to a fever pitch. They become something else, something ancient. This descent finds a focal point in the character of Simon. Sensitive, otherworldly, and deeply intuitive, Simon has always seemed slightly apart from the other boys. His connection to nature is gentle, almost sacred. He alone ventures into the forest's depths, not for power, but for understanding. And here, beneath the cover of trees, he encounters the Lord of the Flies, a pig's head mounted on a stick, buzzing with flies, grotesquely grinning in the sunlight. Simon's hallucinated conversation with the head is the psychological and philosophical heart of the book. The pig's head, this Lord of the Flies, whispers truths veiled in terror. It tells Simon what he already suspects, that the beast isn't out there, lurking in shadows. No, the beast lives inside them all. It is the darkness of the human heart. This moment isn't just literary horror. It is a revelation, cold, unblinking, and spiritual in its magnitude. Simon's encounter strips back the last illusion. He emerges from a forest, not just with new knowledge, but with a kind of tragic transcendence. He has seen the heart of man unfiltered, and it's enough to shatter anyone. But when Simon stumbles upon the others to share this truth, he meets his end. The boys, mid-ritual and whipped into animalistic frenzy, mistake him for the beast itself. They fall upon him with hands, sticks, teeth, and fists. The storm crashes overhead. The tide drags away the evidence, and with it, innocence dies. There is something deeply spiritual and deeply unsettling in Simon's death. He is a Christ figure, a martyr of truth slain by those not yet ready to accept it. And like most prophets, His message is lost beneath the roar of fear and ignorance. Ralph and Piggy are left to process this catastrophe, but they do so in different ways. Ralph grieves. He understands the gravity. He knows what has been lost. Not just Simon's life, but a piece of their shared humanity. Piggy, ever pragmatic, buries the horror beneath euphemism. It was an accident, he says. We was scared. He chooses denial, because to admit otherwise would be to accept that they are capable of murder. Jack, meanwhile, consolidates his rule through fear. His tribe now controls Castle Rock, a fortress of stone and isolation, protected by a massive boulder and patrolled by savages. They beat their drums, chant to their invented deity, and wield power through violence. Jack becomes both chief and priest, blending politics with superstition. Civilization has not just fallen, it has been replaced. When Piggy and Ralph, desperate, venture to Castle Rock to reason with Jack, the response is swift and brutal. Roger, silent, calculating Roger, releases the boulder. It crashes down and kills Piggy instantly. His glasses shatter, his skull crushed, and with his death goes the last voice of reason. The conch, too, is obliterated. It had once symbolized democracy, fairness, the right to speak. Now it lies in pieces among the rocks, no more than a forgotten relic. Let that sink in. The conch and Piggy shattered in the same breath. There's a thematic elegance in that moment. It is the literal and metaphorical end of order. From here, the story shifts into its darkest phase. Ralph becomes the hunted. The tribe sets out to kill him, not in anger or accident, but as a ceremony, an offering. The final chapter becomes a chase through fire and ash, through jungle and memory. But we're not quite there yet. Let's return to Roger for a moment. He's always been unsettling, throwing stones just wide of the mark early in the book, waiting, watching. But with adult supervision gone, with no societal repercussions left, Roger flourishes into pure sadism. His arc is not a descent, but an emergence, like something waiting beneath the skin. His moral compass is not broken. It was never there to begin with. He is the void. All of this reflects a harsh reality. Without structure, without shared values, the raw self emerges. And for many, that self is not noble, but cruel. Golding's novel becomes more than allegory. It is indictment of the myth of progress, of the illusion of innate goodness. It forces us to ask, what are we when the lights go out? Who do we become when no one is watching? These boys, British school children, choir boys even, aren't anomalies. They are us, unmasked. And in that recognition, the story lifts the veil from our eyes. Like Simon staring into the rotting smile of the Lord of the Flies, we see what we didn't want to believe. The darkness isn't out there. It's within. The forest was never haunted. We are. As the story surges toward its climax, the structure of civilization among the boys continues to deteriorate, devolving into near-total savagery. The fragile boundaries of order, once represented by the conch, assemblies, and the pretense of democracy, have completely eroded. What remains is a primal world where fear, power, and instinct reign supreme. Jack's tribe no longer pretends to respect rules or reason. They hunt, they chant, they paint their faces, and in doing so, they shed the final layers of their old identities. They're not boys now. They're something else entirely. Simon's death marked a turning point, but it is Piggy's death that signifies total collapse. The conch, once the symbol of speech, structure, and shared governance, is shattered with him. His fall is not only physical, it is symbolic of the fall of intellect, of clarity, of vision. Piggy had always appealed to logic and justice, even when no one else would listen. His murder by Roger, a boy who has come to embody cruelty without conscience, is a chilling commentary on how unchecked power and dehumanization can annihilate moral anchors. Roger is not motivated by fear. He's not obeying orders. He kills because he wants to. That, perhaps, is Golding's most unsettling truth. Ralph's isolation becomes complete. Once the elected leader, the voice of rationality and decency, he is now a fugitive hunted like an animal. The line between human and beast has been reversed. The true savages are no longer imagined as mythical creatures in the forest, but are flesh and blood, running through the underbrush with spears, painted with the colors of war, chanting in ecstasy. It is in this chaos that the final sequence plays out. Jack and his tribe set the island ablaze, not in a ritual, but as a hunting tactic to flush Ralph out from hiding. The forest, once their playground and refuge, now becomes a roaring inferno. The fire, a dual symbol throughout the novel, is transformed here into something apocalyptic. It no longer represents hope or rescue. It has become destruction, a self-consuming fury born from blind pursuit. And yet, it is this very fire that signals the end of their ordeal. A naval officer, drawn to the smoke, arrives on the beach. His sudden appearance is surreal, almost absurd in its contrast. He is clean, uniformed, and represents a different order entirely. A return to the adult world, to supposed civilization. But this return is complicated, layered with irony. The officer's scolding of the boy's behavior carries the weight of imperialist hypocrisy. He speaks of their failure to behave like proper British boys, unaware that the very society he represents is engaged in its own brutal global conflict. World War II. Ralph weeps, not just for the death of his friends, but for the loss of innocence, the revelation of what human beings are capable of when stripped of accountability and structure. His tears are not for individual sorrow alone, but for the universal tragedy of what they, and we, become when the thin veneer of society is peeled away. This conclusion forces us to confront the central paradox of the novel, that the impulse towards civilization is not inherently stronger than the impulse towards savagery. Golding does not end the story with hope. He offers no clear moral resolution. Instead, he exposes the raw reality that within every human lies both potentialities, the builder of democracies and the worshipper of blood. In many ways, the final rescue is not a rescue at all. It is an interruption. The boys will not forget what they have done. And even if they try, the reader cannot. The island was supposed to be a paradise, a place where they could begin anew, untouched by the adult world's conflicts and failures. Instead, it became a microcosm of every broken society, every war-torn history, every ideology that devours its believers. What makes this story so powerful and so enduring is not just its shocking imagery or haunting twists. It is the fact that Golding holds up a mirror to human nature and dares us to look into it. The reflection we see is not comforting, but it is honest. And honesty, in its purest form, is often the first step toward awakening. Lord of the Flies is not a mere tale of boys stranded on an island. It is a piercing psychological and philosophical exploration of the human condition. What Golding achieves through the simplicity of his premise, a group of children attempting to survive without adults, is a deeply unsettling excavation of civilization's fragility and the lurking power of our basest instincts. At its heart, the novel asks, what happens when you strip away the structures that govern behavior? What remains when the norms we take for granted, laws, ethics, education, culture, are no longer enforced? The answer, Golding suggests, is not just chaos. It's revelation. We are forced to reckon with the uncomfortable truth that these systems do not eradicate our capacity for evil. They merely contain it. Each character becomes a symbol in this tragic allegory. Ralph stands for leadership and reason, Piggy for intellect and social order, Simon for spiritual insight and innate goodness, Jack for the thirst for power, and Roger for pure sadism, unrestrained by conscience. Their transformations, or destructions, chart the arc of society's collapse, and by extension, the collapse that Golding feared might be latent in all of us. The brilliance of Lord of the Flies is that it offers no easy answers. It doesn't tell us whether humanity is doomed or redeemable. It simply lays bare the dualities we carry, order and chaos, reason and emotion, civilization and savagery. It presents a world where children, unshaped by decades of adult life, mirror the very same violence, division, and power struggles we see in grown-up societies. This parallel is no accident. The backdrop of the novel, World War II, reinforces the idea that even the civilized world, with all its rules and ideals, is susceptible to unthinkable brutality. Golding's prose is often sparse and elemental, but it carries a quiet intensity that grows more claustrophobic as the story progresses. The island, lush and idyllic in appearance, becomes a suffocating arena of fear and madness. The boys' descent is not punctuated by grand speeches or melodrama, but by chilling, almost mundane moments of cruelty, miscommunication, and silence. That's what makes it so believable and so horrifying. And in the end, when the naval officer arrives, we are not granted the comfort of closure. There is no justice, no redemption, no restoration of innocence. Only a return to a world that itself is teetering on the edge. The irony is sharp and unmissable. The boys are being rescued by men who are themselves immersed in a global war. Perhaps this is the point Golding most wanted to drive home. Civilization may return, the uniforms may reappear, the titles may be reinstated, but the shadow within, the beast as the boys called it, remains. It cannot be hunted or killed because it lives not in the jungle, but in the human heart. In today's world, riddled with conflict, misinformation, tribalism, and the erosion of shared truth, Lord of the Flies remains eerily relevant. It serves not only as a warning, but as a challenge to recognize the beast, to understand its origins, and to find the courage to resist it, not just in others, but in ourselves. Because in the end, the choice between savagery and civilization, between cruelty and compassion, between fear and understanding, is not made by the group. It is made quietly, continually, by each individual. And that, perhaps, is where hope still lives. And so, as the echoes of the island grow distant, and the final embers of the boys' fire fade into the soft hush of the sea, we find ourselves slowly drifting back, not to the shore of that wild, sun-drenched island, but to the quiet corners of reflection, where thoughts settle and the world turns still. Lord of the Flies leaves us with many questions, not harsh ones that demand urgency, but gentle inquiries that float like leaves on a stream. Questions about who we are beneath the surface, about what we carry within us, both the light and the dark, and about how we navigate that fragile space between fear and understanding, instinct and kindness. But here, in this moment, there's no need to answer anything at all. Just let the story wash over you like a distant tide, soft and slow, and trust that meaning will come not in noise, but in quietness. You can imagine the boys now, not lost, not broken, but resting at last beneath the stars, the jungle behind them, the storm within them stilled. The island, once wild and fearful, now gently breathing under moonlight, the trees swaying with a peaceful rhythm, the air carrying only the faint sound of waves meeting sand. Everything is calm now. Let the story go. Let your thoughts float free like driftwood upon the sea. You are safe. You are home. Breathe in and out. And if dreams should come, may they be filled with light, with kindness, and with a quiet understanding that all storms in time pass. Good night.